Welcome to episode 437 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing another DIY filmmaker, Neil McCay. He just did a really cool low-budget psychological thriller called Trip. Again, he's a guy who just went out and made things happen for himself. He did a couple of shorts and now has this feature film which he wrote, directed, produced, and even edited. So we'll be talking about all of that and ultimately how he got this screenplay produced. So stay tuned for that interview. SYS's six-figure screenplay contest is open for submissions. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. Our final deadline is July 31st, so it is approaching. If your script is ready, definitely submit. We're looking for low-budget shorts and features. I'm defining low budget as less than six figures, in other words, less than $1 million US. We've got lots of industry judges reading scripts in the later rounds. We're giving away thousands in cash and prizes. If you want to submit to the contest or learn more about it, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. And also this year, we're running an in-person film festival in tandem with our screenplay contest. It's for low-budget films produced for less than $1 million US. We have features and shorts categories, lots of industry judges, just like the screenplay contest. The festival is going to take place in Hollywood, California from October 7th to the 9th. If you have a finished film or would like to submit to the festival, you can, or if you have a finished film or would like to learn more about the festival, you can go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/festival. You'll see a link to Film Freeway. We're actually taking all of the submissions for the festival through Film Freeway, so you can find us on Film Freeway as well. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 437. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So just a quick few words about what I've been working on. The big thing I've been working on, I've been talking about now probably for months, is this NFT project, which we're going to be doing for the Rideshare Killer. It's proving a lot more difficult than I had hoped, just taking a lot more time, a lot of complexities to all of this. And, when I started this, 6 months ago or something, I really knew virtually nothing about this. So it's definitely a little bit of a learning curve, but I am getting up to speed. My revised ETA is now the end of August. I'm hoping I can get it all done by then. We'll see. I'm hoping I can really get things going. Again, it's just taken a little while to kind of understand the landscape and figure it all out. But again, hopefully by August is sort of my hard goal, is to be done by the end of that month. The other thing is the contest and the film festival. Those are starting to ramp up. So I've started to look at more of those scripts and more of those films. I'm excited to see what else comes in. Definitely have found some good films and some good scripts already. If you have a low budget screenplay or a low budget film, definitely do submit. As I said, the final deadline is July 31st. So those are some of the things that I have been working on. Now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Neil McCay. Here is the interview. Welcome, Neil, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
So I was born and raised in Fairfax, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. And I saw Gremlins when I was 6 years old and became fascinated with monsters and movies and all that stuff. And kind of always, that was like that's what I want to be when I grow up kind of thing. But as I got into high school and college, I kind of realized, oh, wait a minute, there's jobs for operating cameras and editing, and like you can write and do this stuff and like put it all together. So I think in college is kind of where I was like, oh, maybe this whole filmmaking thing is for real. And then I just kind of I worked at an internship at a police station and met with somebody there who was trying to produce a script and worked on that with him. That was my first movie. And then it just kind of took it from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of had a lull in things between about 2008, 2016 ish. But now I'm kind of getting back on the wagon a little bit. And then that's the movie I got, Trip. That's kind of my back in the game thing. But if you look at my IMDb, like there's kind of a lull between projects. So
yeah. So now just go into a little bit more depth here. So you met this guy where you were working some sort of a job, and you met a guy with a script. And what did you end up doing on that production? You were one of the producers. You came in.
Yeah, he was a police officer, and he was trying to be an actor and producer. And he had written this heist movie. And he wanted to, a vehicle for him to act in and produce. And he had written this thing. And then I basically came in and just did all the directing and hiring the crew and stuff like that. And then got this thing, I did all the behind the scenes stuff. But then, it was just kind of we just kind of hooked up and made this movie. And no, I didn't. He wrote it. I didn't write it, but I was also a writer. So I did. From there on out, I did my own stuff that I would write the scripts for. But that was it was just happenstance. We just kind of met and did this project.
So where did you get the experience to direct? Had you done a bunch of shorts up to this point? Did you have some experience in school? Like, what was your experience pitching him? Hey, I can direct your movie. Like, what gave him the confidence you could do it?
So I was kind of doing a quote unquote film school education at the college, and they didn't really have like a film program, but they had a media lab where you could go in and mess with Photoshop, and you could rent cameras and edit. The nonlinear editing was just becoming a thing. This was like late 90s. So I kind of just made a film school education for myself, like taking these communication classes where you would learn these skills. And then I got a job at the media lab. So I would be, in charge of the inventory of the cameras and showing the other students how to use them and things like that. So by the time this project came around, I was like, well, I can do all of these things. Like I know, all the technical in and out. And that was the one thing he was lacking. So it was a very, he needs this, I need this, I needed the experience because I never directed. Well, I mean, I'd done like little short projects, but never a feature. So this was kind of our both. All right, let's, trial by fire now. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'd be curious to just get your opinion. Certainly when I got out of LA, or when I got to LA and started pursuing screenwriting, I got some of these low level, basically PA jobs. And I found in what you're describing, working in this media lab, those jobs typically are a lot of long hours. They're fairly low pay. And I found when I was working these long hours for low pay, it made it difficult to write and kind of move my career down the line. Now you made a connection or made connections at this place. So there's always that, you can network a little bit at these jobs, but where do you stand? What do you think is good? If someone fresh out of college, should they go and get a job in the industry, potentially facing long hours? Should they work outside the industry so they can work maybe less hours, spend more of their free time on it? Where do you stand on that?
That's a great question. And it's complicated because I guess it kind of depends on what, what direction you want to go. Like me personally, I didn't know when I was younger, but where I am in life now, I kind of feel like I would rather be the big fish in a little pond, like just to have my hands in all the cookie jars and then, have more control and things like that. So I would say doing that, like start off as a PA and work your way up would not be like my kind of thing. But it's like, I don't know, I guess I would say more of that. If you're in LA, do that thing where you're working at a restaurant or something while you're working on the script, and then figure out a way to, keep your control over your project and then do that. But then it's like, well, how do you get the experience and stuff? Well, again, it's complicated, but I just don't know if you're even going to get that kind of experience doing like PA work. Cause you have to work, all these hours and you're just like bottom of the barrel and then move your way up to get the actual experience where you're, like even like with editing, like, where you're hands-on actually cutting footage, you got to work years for that. Yeah. And it's just like, it just seems, I don't know. I don't think that's a whole other podcast, I think.
Yeah. No kidding. So no, there's definitely some of the things to think about. So let's dig into your new feature film. It's called Trip. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or log line. What is this new film all about?
So it is about a daughter kills herself, and the mother is just wrought with grief and becomes a reclusive alcoholic who won't leave the house. And she's visited by a therapist who offers her a hallucinogenic drug so that she can commune with the dead and talk to her dead daughter and find out why the daughter committed suicide. And then she takes her up on it, and basically it becomes haunted by the experiences that her daughter had leading up to the suicide.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So where did this idea come from? What was sort of the kernel or the genesis for this?
So I was talking to my friend David Groves, who's the producer on this movie. He lives out in California, and we were talking about doing a contained horror movie, kind of like a one location, kind of because of budgetary, but also I like the idea of like this kind of claustrophobic feeling movie. And it was like a challenge. Like, how can we make like one location interesting? And then we knew we wanted to do a horror movie, and I was kind of coming up with ideas and bouncing them off of him. And then I think it just like dawned on me, like, what if the villain, because that was the thing that I was struggling with, like, who's the villain, and like, what does the villain want? What is like, what's the monster? What's the thing that's coming after the mother? And then I just kind of dawned on me, like, well, what if I just made it like an emotion, like depression, and then all of a sudden, like, oh wait, it could be this, it could be that, and it's like symbolic. But it was like, once I had, I could put a face to the creature or the monster, the spirit or whatever, then it was like, oh, this is a real tangible thing, and it was easier to connect then, because like, oh, this is the motivation of what this monster wants, or the villain wants, and like it was easier to write because he wants this, and then she wants this, and then they're battling it out. So, But yeah, so I think it was just that. It was just, can an emotion be the villain? And I just kind of went with it from there.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and you sort of alluded to this a little bit. You wanted to do a contained horror movie in one house. How much research had you done? Had you talked to distributors? Did you have some idea that this could work financially? Like, was there a business model in place before you started writing and producing this thing?
Not really. And in retrospect, it would probably be smarter if I'd I basically was like, okay, here's the budget. Here's how much I can spend. Can it be done? And then it was like, then I just kind of put all the focus into like just making this thing happen. And then afterwards I was like, all right, then I can shop it around or try to get distribution or what have you. But then of course, while I'm in the process of this, I'm hearing podcasts of people like, no, you got to start building an audience like before you even get on set. And it's like, well, damn.
Yeah, thanks. Now you tell me.
I know, it's like, I'm too little too late for that. But so yeah, I wouldn't advise it, but I kind of was like, all right, just make the thing and then see what happens with it. And that's kind of how I approached it.
Gotcha. So let's dig into the writing of the script. I'd just be curious to kind of get your process a little bit. Where do you typically write? When do you typically write? Starbucks, you need the ambient noise. You have a home office. You write in the morning, the late at night. What does your writing schedule look like?
Not to be a cop out, but just whenever I can feel motivated. So whether it's morning or night or anything like that, I can kind of do it and wherever, whenever. And, doing it at Starbucks is nice. Doing it in my own house is nice. I like to listen to music. So I kind of like put on like earbuds and do that. It's just really like the struggle I find is getting the time and the motivation. And it's just hard because once I get going, it's like easy, once you get 5 or 10 minutes in, all of a sudden you go 2 hours. But just when you have that staring you in the head, like, I got to write, 10 pages. How long is that going to take? And you just procrastinate, put it off. So it's really, to me, it's just do it. Like, just sit down and do something. And then from there, then it doesn't matter. It's like, I'm in it,
Yeah. And so how much time do you spend doing outlining, indexing cards? How much time do you then spend in final draft, actually cranking out script pages?
A good deal, actually. Yeah. I think I do a lot of legwork early, with kind of mapping things out, and there's all kinds of little exercises where you draw the circle and your characters, and then you start, little spider web things and stuff. So I do all kinds of doodles and all kinds of things. I kind of like to know going into it, all right, I have my, 3 acts, and, this makes sense. And this is where these are kind of the points where things happen. And it's like, okay, does that make sense? Like, I don't want to get into it. And then I realize, oh, my final act is like 5 pages. Like, that's not going to work, So I do spend a good deal of planning, and I know some people are like, no, just go write it. I'm like, no, I got to know. I got to have the blueprint in front of me,
So what does your development process look like? Once you have a draft that you like, how do you handle it? Do you have a number of writer friends you send it to, actor friends, producer friends? And what do you do with that feedback? Maybe you can talk about that process a little bit.
I think I'd advise I personally love having people to just be brutally honest and just say, hey, like, I'll just ask them, like, does this make sense? Do you know where I'm going with this? Do you get it? Like, is this scary? Is this surprising? Is this like, do you think this is interesting? Is it too long? All of that stuff I ask people. I kind of like to, give them some vague questions so I'm not leading them to like, did you see this coming or something like that? But enough where you get the feedback that you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
so that, oh, okay, people don't think this makes sense, so I got to clear this up. But yeah, if you have a couple trusted people and then that are just honest with you, I like to get, feedback that way. But generally I think kind of, when you just go through a rough draft and you can kind of pull yourself out of it a little bit and just say, hey, if I'm reading this for the first time, does this make sense? Do people know who this character is and why they're doing what they're doing? Or are they going to connect, oh, we're in the past and now we're in the future, whatever. But yeah, I would say, I do a good bit of like, hey, what do you think of this? Is there a way to do this better or something?
Yeah, yeah. And how do you approach screenplay structure? You mentioned you like to have your 3 acts laid out. You have like the Blake Snyder camp that really breaks each one of the acts down into about 3 or 4 or 5 key beats. How granular do you get on your planning out of your structure, and how rigid are you to that 3-act structure?
I'd say like not too granular. It's funny because the Blake Snyder thing, and I go like, oh man, like that's way too in the weeds. Like every 2 pages, like this beat happens, this beat happens. But I mean, the premise is real. And if you look at anything, I don't know, like the hero's journey, and there's like all these, like my script can beat up your script, and all these like other tools out there, they're all kind of similar in that, okay, this has got to happen and this is going to happen, like to keep things, moving along. And I generally just kind of look like, okay, are there character arcs, and do these things happen when they're supposed to? Like, for instance, like in the middle of the movie, do we kind of have a turn, like, oh, we're going to here, but then we have like a false sense of happiness or false sense of sorrow or whatever it is, and then we kind of reverse gears and then turn things up on its head, and then you go into act 3. So I think there's like just a general, when things are supposed to happen, your page 10 moment, really have the movie moving by page 10, that kind of thing. But I don't have like a strict, like, if it's off by a few pages or something, just as long as generally stuff is happening and you're moving along and you're not like, 20 pages of nothing,
Yeah. And how do you approach genre requirements? I mean, this is a contained, horror thriller. How do you approach some of the genre requirements? I mean, you get very prescriptive things from distributors, like, a scare every 10 minutes or something like that. But, what was sort of your approach with that, with the genre? Did you watch a bunch of similar movies? Did you kind of try and figure out how they work?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I did. I did like, it was like homework. Like I would watch like all these other movies, and I would just see like, okay, how are they setting up the scare, and how long are they taking, and when are these things happening? I don't know. I mean, there are formulas, but like a lot of the stuff I saw, like they could go and they say, all right, we're gonna start off with this awesome, first scene, cold open. And then for the next hour, it's just exposition. And then they start coming in, with crazy stuff. Others, like you said, every 10 minutes, there's a scare. It just was kind of like, okay, all right, that's what they're doing. And then I would try to figure out, like, I think the first thing you got to do is like, what's your story? Like, what's your beginning, middle, and end? And then can you pepper in the scares, in between? Cool. But if not, you can't just do scary stuff that has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
Just because like you need a scare every 10 minutes or whatever it is. So stay true to the story, and then just kind of mimic what, what others are doing as far as how they're setting things up and when they're peppering those things in.
Yeah. So once you had the script done, a draft that you were happy with, what were your next steps? How did you go about getting this thing greenlit and into production?
So I had already kind of had the funding in place, because so part of the thing that was a struggle with writing was like, okay, I can't do this because that's going to cost too much money. So how do I, but so I just kind of wrote it out, and I was like, okay, now I gotta reel it in, and I can't get crazy with these kinds of effects because, it's a low budget. But I sort of knew kind of once it was done, like, okay, I have X amount of dollars for all of these things. Can it be done? And then, and then I would kind of adjust maybe the script accordingly, if that makes sense. Like I kind of would go out and say, hey, is this possible to get this done? Like for the effects, for instance, of like makeup and stuff like that. And then based on the answers I'd get, I'd be like, okay, maybe we can change the script around a little bit. But
Gotcha.
It was kind of a back and forth. It's like, what are my limitations with the script? And then what are my limitations with the actual, talent and the crew? that I'd need to pull this off.
And how were you able to get that funding set up?
So I put a lot of it in myself, like the old school, like credit cards, things like that. And it is a really low budget. So it wasn't like, it was kind of, I mean, I could do this, and then, I had like a few friends like kick in some to help me out and stuff, but I didn't spend a lot of time trying to like secure funding and investors and stuff, because I'd gone down that road before, and it was like, and then it's like a full-time job trying to keep up with that. And then you're always worried in the back of your mind, well, if it makes no money, then how am I going to pay these people back? And it's just like,
yeah. So you mentioned a producer. Was his name Michael Gross that we worked with?
David Gross.
David Gross. So how did you meet him? How did he come into the orbit of this project?
So we both went to George Mason University, which is a college out in Virginia. So we were a couple of years apart though. So I had, I was in LA, and then I came back and started working for the university. And that's when he was an undergrad there. And we worked in that same multimedia lab. And we were both trying to get into, he wanted to get into filmmaking too. And then we just kind of started, talking about stuff, and he had a short film script and I had a short film script. So we were like, well, I'll help you make yours and you help me make mine. And then we kind of joined forces, but he was like the writer director of his own thing, and I was the writer director of my own thing, but we kind of like pooled our resources to kind of help each other make the movies. And then we got along really well, and we worked really well together. So then we did a feature together, and then and we've been kind of buddies and filmmaking partners ever since.
Gotcha. So when you were done this script, was there ever any attempt to try and just sell the script or get it set up with a bigger budget, enter it into contests, send it to producers, send it to actors, send it to directors, or just you knew you were going to make it from the start?
Oh, I knew, I was going to make it from the start, because it was kind of, like I said, I had this lull in project. So this was kind of a thing to kind of a stepping stone to get me back into it. And then it was really just a vehicle to, provide myself an opportunity to direct, something. Like if I wasn't a writer, I would have maybe tried to option somebody else's thing, but that was the whole goal, was just, this is a means to direct a movie. Gotcha. And I just happened to be a writer. So I was like, okay, might as well do it. But of course, now that it's done, hopefully that becomes a vehicle to maybe, pitch to, I don't know, a studio or get more money or whatever the next steps would be. So that's kind of a short or long-term outlook too.
Gotcha. And I wonder about festivals. Did you guys do the festival circuit when you got this done? Did you go straight to distributors? What was your experience?
Kind of I played around with the festival circuit. It was a little frustrating because this was 2021 when I was kind of sending it out, because of COVID, you had a lot of festivals doing virtual or just not happening at all in 2020. So I feel like in 2021, you're competing with 2 years worth of movies versus just one. So I didn't have like a lot of luck with festivals. I mean, I didn't do, a ton. I think I maybe like sent out to half a dozen or something like that. So once I was kind of, all right, I'm not getting anywhere with this, I was just like, all right, I'm just going to focus on the distribution angle, and then landed a distribution deal in the late summer, early fall last year. And it just takes them a while, because they had all these other movies in the queue. And then they're very hands-on with like the, getting your marketing and public relations stuff and stuff. So how did
you bump into your distributor? Just do you reach out cold letters, cold calls? Was it somebody you knew from past experience? But how did you ultimately find and land with your distributor?
Actually, like I did kind of some cold calls, just calling like, hey, we want to talk to you about a movie they have. Some cold, emails just coming out, a little bit of that. The distribution company that I landed with, Terror Films, is weirdly enough, the head of acquisitions is that police officer that I worked with at the police station years back that we did our first project together. And his name's Jim Clock, and he just happens to be on this in the distribution world. I mean, he's still an actor and producer too, but I was like, let me throw it out there. And I found out the company is great with like, helping filmmakers, and they're all fellow filmmakers in that company. So it was just like, oh, well, yeah, I'm like, these are people that care about, movies. It's not just some distribution company that's like, yeah, whatever, we're just going to throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. It was just it's just interesting how everything kind of came full circle.
Yeah, that's a good coincidence. It just shows the power of networking, meeting people in the industry years later. Those contacts can be valuable. So I just like to wrap up the interviews by asking the guest if they've seen anything recently that they thought was really great they could recommend to basically a screenwriting audience. Anything on HBO, Netflix that you've seen recently that you really like?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe it's like a couple months late on this, but I really liked the show Yellow Jackets, which was on Showtime.
Hmm.
It kind of reminded me of it was almost like Twin Peaks, and it was just very strange, but it wasn't so weird. It was like out there like the Twin Peaks was, but yeah, I just thought that was a really cool show. I think at the time you could get like a free trial with Showtime,
Yeah.
to the streaming. But there's another movie that I thought was kind of cool. It was a horror movie called The Night House, and with Rebecca Hall. I think some of the plot elements went kind of over my head, but there was some really cool, freaky stuff that they did in that movie that I definitely think it's like worth watching. And it wasn't just your typical like, oh, it's a scary horror movie. Like they had some heady kind of emotional stuff, like where it was about grief and loss, and that's kind of what Trip was. So it had that similar. Like I like movies like that aren't just so scary. Yeah. They kind of get into the story elements too. So
yeah, no, that's a great tip. I have not heard of that one, so I'll check that one out. How can people see Trip? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like? When's it going to be available?
Yeah, there's a well, I don't know when this podcast airs, but it's coming out wide stream distribution on May 20th. There's like a premiere live chat event on May 13th, on Friday the 13th. But really, if you just go to terrorfilms.net, so TERROR films.net, like terror.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of a tongue twister, terror films. And then there's like a splash page. Like if you just go to the films, it'll be a recent film. It's called Trip, and you go there, and then there's going to have all the stuff, like how to see it, where to go, and that kind of thing. The IMDb link, I'm sure, stuff like that.
Perfect. So what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Anything you're comfortable sharing, I will put in the show notes: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, a blog, anything you want to share.
Yeah. So I have an IMDb page that'll hopefully, when this airs, be updated, because I got to put pictures and stuff like that up there. I think my handle on Instagram is neil.mckay at Instagram, or Neil McCay. You can find me one of those two.
Perfect. Yep. We'll find it.
Yep. We have a podcast, actually. My buddy David, who I mentioned, 611 Films podcast. If you Google that, you'll find us on Spotify or Apple or whatever. And we just talk about movie stuff, and then we have guests on occasionally and stuff like that.
Okay, so. Perfect. Yeah. Well, I'm always interested in checking out new podcasts, so I'll definitely check that one out as well. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today, Neil. Good luck with this film, and good luck with all your future films as well.
Thanks. No, been great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks.
I just want to talk quickly about SYS Select. It's a service for screenwriters to help them sell their screenplays and get writing assignments. The first part of the service is the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline, synopsis, and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays they want to produce. Dozens of producers are in the system looking for screenplays right now. There have been a number of success stories come out of the service. You can find out about all the SYS Select successes by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. Also on SYS podcast episode 222, I talked with Steve Deering, who was the first official success story to come out of the SYS Select database. When you join SYS Select, you get access to the screenplay database along with all the other services that we're providing to SYS Select members. These services include the newsletter. This monthly newsletter goes out to a list of over 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also provide screenwriting leads. We have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads services, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These leads run the gamut. There's producers looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. They're looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots, all types of projects. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. Also, you get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. We also have a number of screenwriting classes that are recorded and available in the SYS Select forum. These are all the classes that I've done over the years, so you'll have access to those whenever you want once you join. The classes cover every part of writing your screenplay, from concept to outlining to the first act, second act, third act, as well as other topics like writing short films and pitching your projects in person. Once again, if this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, please go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that is sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer and also actor Jim Mahoney. He wrote and also starred in a new horror comedy feature film called Gatlop. It's about 4 friends who play a haunted drinking game. He has a number of produced feature films as well as a number of shorts. So we'll talk about all of this as well as how he got this new screenplay produced. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's our show. Thank you for listening.